I thought it's probably time to start. Good morning. How nice you're all here. This is going to be in English, at least we'll try, we non-native speakers. And this is of course the workshop to be this morning, because first of all we have the nicer music, and second of all, imagine yourself on the hottest day in Germany, which is probably today, making yourself ready for a television shoot, and think about schlepping all the equipment across to I don't know where. The people outside may do this, we won't anymore, and you won't after this, because this is about making journalism with your smartphone, which is very good with regard to weather, and makes a lot of sense. And I'm really happy that some of the leading personnel in Mojo, mobile journalism in Europe, are here. The first one is Glenn.
I'll take it down.
Glenn, so you can recognize him over here.
Yeah, okay.
Glenn,
Hi.
who's working with RTE, which is the public service broadcaster in Ireland, in Dublin, and he calls himself Innovation Lead, which he definitely is. And he organized the Mobile Journalism Conference in March, the first one ever held worldwide. So he says, and we believe, and he's been traveling around Europe for quite some years now, talking about Mojo. The second one on the panel next to me is Nick Garnett with the BBC, and we were a bit worried that he wouldn't come because he had been sent to Tunisia a week ago or 10 days ago after the terrorism attack happened there, and has been reporting from there, of course only on his iPhone, for BBC 5 Live, but also for breakfast television. I saw you. And he's been doing that since 2009, so only working with his mobile phone. And the third one on the panel is, and I didn't ask you because you were late, how I properly pronounce your name.
Wietse.
Wietse. Wietse Wellinger, right? Quite nice. When we printed his name tag, the people outside thought Omrod Friesland would actually be a second person to come. It's not. It means broadcasting for Friesland, like the Frisian Broadcasting Club, or how...
Public broadcasting.
Yeah, exactly. And you've been attending some of the workshops, or one of the workshops that Glenn did.
A one-day workshop Glenn,
Exactly.
in April last year.
And since then you are doing mobile journalism. We thought we'd start you off with one example everyone brought here and show it. It's like a 2 or 3 minute video, and then everyone will tell you how he did it. It's a coincidence that there are only men up here, because there are many women doing it. There's another one in Hamburg, Bianca, but she couldn't come. And we'll talk about how we did it, and is it just for nerds, or does it actually make sense? We think, of course, it is only for nerds. And this is the first example, and we need some sound for that, please, out of the computer. Hello? Can wir Computer den Ton wieder hören, bitte? There you go. So we start it again.
The shingle beach at Kilcool is popular with sea anglers and sea birds alike. Each year, a stretch of the beach is home to a colony of little terns, one of Ireland's rarest seabirds. The area is enclosed and is patrolled day and night.
They'll have 24-hour monitoring just to give the birds maximum protection, because for so many years they've been a species on the brink in Ireland.
The shingle beach provides camouflage for eggs and chicks. This chick on the left is less than an hour old, the latest arrival in a record year for the colony.
This is the most amount of terns we've ever had in Kilcool since the project begun about 30 years ago. We have 111 breeding pairs and 213 chicks on the beach, so it's pretty good.
But conservation can be a precarious affair. 2 years ago, high tides washed away every egg in the colony. This year, the chicks are being colour-ringed for the first time. This will inform conservation requirements in the future.
This will tell us a lot of information, because really up to this point we have very little information on their movements after they leave Ireland.
Many of this year's chicks have already moved to other locations along the east coast. A much longer journey awaits as they'll migrate to Africa for the first time soon. But the little terns will return next summer, and this huge conservation effort will start all over again.
Like in the middle of the show.
Philip Bromwell for RTE News, Kilcool.
And of course we'll have little children after this. After animals. Glenn, how was this shot, and actually who shot it? Because you always say you're not the journalist.
Yeah. Okay, so I come from a technology background, and I worked in news for 16 years, and I used to train journalists as video journalists to shoot with bigger cameras and to edit on laptops. And about nearly 6 years ago now, we got into the stage where we wanted to bring smartphones in, but in order to make the investment, we needed to kind of do a business case to justify it. Because we went from Nokia E52s, which were, how would you say, a very reliable, simple phone, to smartphones. The E52 costs €15, the smartphones cost €600, and our financial controller just sort of said, I have no problem with giving smartphones to the journalists, but if all they're going to do is make calls and send texts, then they're going to stick with the Nokias. So we started with just using them for social media, then we started using them for radio, which Nick will talk about at length, and then gradually I developed this kind of workflow to use it for video as well. So the package that you just saw was actually shot by one of my colleagues. I've shot some content, but I'm not a journalist, so I would never show something that I've shot as an example of what RTE staff do. But this is from a guy called Philip Bromwell, who was trained by the BBC many years ago as a video journalist. And he did originally my 1 day and then my 5-day course as a masterclass to show him all the stuff that you can do with it. And this was one of the stories that he shot. It was about his 8th story that he produced with the phone. Yeah.
And how did you shoot it?
So the rig that's over there in the corner of the room would be pretty much what he used. We've recently changed the microphone setup, but the kit is quite simple. I went out with the idea that whatever accessories we buy, they should not cost more than the cost of the phone. So a cheap photography tripod, not a video tripod, some way to mount the phone on the tripod, a decent microphone, and what is not shown there is a battery pack and an LED light. And that's everything that he needs.
We'll open up for questions whenever you have any. And as long as you don't have any, we look at the other examples. The second one is Nick's.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, just before we play mine, I'm a radio journalist for the BBC. But what mobile journalism has done is it's blurred all the boundaries. And so in the sequence that you'll see now, there's only one bit of radio. And everything else is the added extras that I do. So it's TV journalism, it's web journalism as well. And it's that's added on to my role, and it makes it very easy to add those things on. You're not having to retrain somebody completely in other forms of journalism. It comes from the hardware that you're actually using.
I have the feeling that the computer fell asleep.
It's gone in sleep mode, is it?
Het grote Frieske Keiningskrieg dat van Frankrijk terugrent om Denemarken stiert in haast alle Frieske geschiedenisboeken.
Oh.
The decision to adopt the iPhone is brilliant news, but I've a feeling we're not really using it to its full potential. The riots in Manchester gave me a chance to show what it can really do. We had to find a way to safely report the story. Using something as small as an iPhone, I was able to research, record and broadcast in relative safety.
When we got here, we found that there were a number of targets: the police and the media.
Radio Manchester's radio car was set upon, turned over and burnt out. Luckily, their reporter escaped.
So it was really important that you stayed as low-key as possible. Now, we were able to do it because I used the phone just like this to broadcasting quality.
It did the job of a laptop computer, a BlackBerry, an audio recorder, a stills camera, a video camera, a television, a radio, and indeed a radio car.
Back to Nick Garnett. Nick, you're in Manchester City Centre. What's happening now?
The rioters in front of me now running because they can see the police coming. The police coming up on two directions to try and cut them off.
Hogeveen is a care home in northern Holland with its very own supermarket, restaurant, and even its own pub. All the people living here have dementia, but are allowed free rein inside the walled village. The only door with a lock on is the one that leads outside.
We counted as a home to give people the possibility to live a normal life as possible. We'll always ring the bell.
That's all ladies that lived at home and took care of the children. Some of them worked for just a short time and then they started looking after their kids.
My name's Rory and I live at Paul Riverside. I guess it's still by the side of the river, but part of it. People that say, oh, you should worry about the potholes, I'm going to stay no matter what, but that's due to the potential fire hazards, potential looting. So I'm going to get my wife and daughters out now. I just deal with what life throws at me, so it does or it doesn't, and you act accordingly.
I'm by no means a dance teacher, and I'm fully a games player. So for me, it was difficult to comprehend this Zumba phenomenon that's taken over our school. It won't be Zumba for every school. It works for us, it won't work for everyone else.
Today we're producing more than 20 different types of species of fish, ready for delivery tonight for your plate tomorrow. Grimsby is the epicentre of seafood in the UK still.
Live back to Calais, Nick Garnett is there, our reporter. Nick, good morning to you. I know you've been there all morning. Just describe to us what you've seen.
There are hundreds and hundreds of lorries parked up on the roads around Calais this morning. Dozens and dozens of police trying and searching through those vehicles to try and see if there are any migrants on board. We saw the pictures yesterday.
Right, so hoping this is broadcasting. This is Nick Garnett from BBC Radio 5 Live. We're in a village called Sipagat in Nepal. It's about 3 hours drive from Kathmandu, and we came up today in 4 before. And I'm just going to show you an image of just how much devastation there is in this village as I'll pan around. It's absolutely wrecked. Let me just walk up and take you. Is the main street. This is the marketplace. Now the locals here tell me they haven't had any aid through. The helicopters have flown over and then they've flown by because there's nowhere, because they're so big, there's nowhere for the helicopters to actually land around here. People are asking me on Twitter why I'm able to broadcast this. For some reason, I don't know why, the 3G network around here is very strong. As I said, you know, the temples is one thing, but this is human life that's just on. Anyway, I'm going to leave it now because I need to keep the battery. Hopefully I'll broadcast a little bit later on, but you know, this is what devastation looks like, and this is what the quake does.
So if you go out, what do you take with you?
As a base kit, I will carry a phone.
It's not just a phone.
It's an iPhone. It's an iPhone. I mean, this is an iPhone 6 Plus. But it'll work from anything from an iPhone 3G onwards. The live broadcasting requires an iPhone 5 really, or higher, and it was using an app called Degero. There are a few of them around, but that's the live. That's the one that we've decided to use. One of the advantages.
You must say with Degero you need a server backend, so you need to buy a server that goes into your main switchboard, and yeah.
Yeah, but it's so much better quality than trying to use Skype or anything like that. The amazing thing about that was that Breakfast News, I wasn't working for television at that point, I was there for radio, and they phoned me up and said, our satellite truck is stuck in the queue for the channel, and we can't get any lives out. Can you talk to us on the phone? And I said, I could probably talk to you in quality on Lucy Live, which is the audio app. And then I thought, I've also got Degero. This was 7:26. At 7:26, I said, what about me using Degero? At which point, I pulled up a tripod, I stuck the phone, just using that same type of kit there. I had a tie-clip mic, I had an earphone, which was just a normal pair of headphones in my ear. And at 7:34, it went live. So it took 8 minutes to rig, contact the gallery, set up the shot. They were telling me, stand a bit left, stand a bit right. and then we went live. So 8 minutes to rig, which is fantastic. And it was the only live TV feed from Calais that day because nobody else could get their trucks through. So I'll carry a phone, a pair of headphones, and a mic shield to go over the end of the phone. And that's it, really. That's all I carry. Sometimes I'll carry an external microphone. Sometimes I won't, because the microphone on the iPhone phone is normally good enough. Yeah.
So with this app, you have two channels, one going out, one coming back?
Yeah. So you have IFBs from the same thing. You don't need a... At first, that didn't work, and you had to have a second phone for Q, but now it's all done internally, and it doesn't affect it. The amazing thing was that was done on one 3G signal in France. It wasn't even done... I had a satellite. This is my portable satellite dish. Now, I thought I was broadcasting through the satellite dish as well, and when I'd finished, one of the engineers came across and said that was just 3G. So, you know, it's staggering. And if you think across Europe at least of the availability of 3G or 4G or Wi-Fi, Degero bonds two signals. It bonds together the phone signal, but also the Wi-Fi signal at the same time. It's magic. It's black magic. And it works. And it's fantastic. And yes, there was a delay there. But it wasn't that much longer than a standard satellite truck's delay, really. Maybe a second longer. But as long as you really know... They didn't tell me what my first question was there. Otherwise, I would have started talking beforehand. But, you know, if I'd been more aware, I'd have asked them what my first question was going to be so I could stop talking earlier. But frankly, I was putting up a tripod and sticking things in my ear. And that was more important.
So Nick is doing it internationally, kind of, though you're the North of England reporter?
Yeah, I cover the North of England, but I get sent on major stories. So it's been the Charlie Hebdo shootings this year. I was in Malta for the migrant deaths when the boat sank, in Nepal. I was in Calais and then came home, and then 24 hours later was in Tunisia for the shootings there. A lot of the time, I say that it's mobile journalism. I still use the satellite dish a lot because very often where I'm going, they don't have 3G networks. Bizarrely, in Nepal, where everything else had been flattened, for some reason, in that village, there was a 3G signal. I have no idea why it was there. Later in the day, it disappeared. I think there'd been more tremors and it had taken that mast out. But staggering that I managed to do. And that was just a case of looking at my phone and thinking, hang on, 3G? I can do something.
And you're doing it... Oh, there's a question. Let's go for that first.
Maybe a word about the battery, about the recharging. We've seen that in that area where everything's falling down. There was no energy.
There's no energy. I use one of these, which is a power bank that's on Amazon by a company called EC Technology. Now, it has a battery capacity of 22,400 milliamp hours. And that means that, in theory, you could get about 17 or 18 full recharges from an iPhone. And I keep it in my back pocket with a cable attached to my phone. So I'm constantly charging, constantly trying to put some battery life in it. In Paris, I was late putting that on. And by the time I'd got into the centre of Paris, my battery life was only 20%. So I had to really, really work hard. And the really important thing about that type of battery is that it charges at 2.1 amps, which is the higher capacity that the big iPhone charges, that really pushes battery life through. So you need to, I mean, that's an absolutely crucial thing, and I carry that everywhere.
It's very heavy?
Very heavy. Hey, have a look. So pass it around.
Nick is doing
small packages. This one's much smaller, and you can do 5 iPhones with this one.
Yeah.
So Nick is doing it worldwide, which is doing it kind of regional. So yeah. Mojo is also a topic for regional television. Would you press the bar again because it fell asleep?
Maybe before you start playing it, I should warn you, it's not in English, it's in Frisian.
Het grote Frieske Koninkrijk dat van Frankrijk terugrent om Denemarken stiert in haast alle Frieske geschiedenisboeken. Maar in dit nieuwe boek van archeoloog Johan Nicolai is het net waarom te vinden, omdat het meer bestien had.
Nee, mijn hoofd heeft dat niet bestaan en is dat in de latere bronnen eigenlijk geconstrueerd, gemaakt. Ik denk dat er wel degelijk een groot Fries koninkrijk was, maar dat dat nooit groter is geweest dan bijvoorbeeld wat nu Noord-Nederland is.
En dus alleen een Fries koninkrijk?
Ja, Friesland, Groningen en ik denk ook de kop van Noord-Holland. Ik denk dat Texel en Wieringen ook tot dat grote Friese koninkrijk kunnen behoren.
Nicolai komt tot die conclusie na het bestuderen van goudvindsten in Nederland, Engeland en Duitsland. Het goud wie in de middeleeuwen wichtig om de macht van de koning te uiteren.
Nou, dit is een mantelspeld. Een gouden speld in een hele karakteristieke noordelijke Friese vorm is uitgevoerd. En ik ga ervan uit dat dit soort spelden door regionale koningen werden gebruikt om volgelingen aan zich te binden. Dus om sociale netwerken tot stand te brengen. In de vroege middeleeuwen bestonden koninkrijken niet uit territoriale eenheden, maar uit sociale netwerken. En die werden met dit soort objecten tot stand gebracht en ook naar buiten toe gevisualiseerd.
Troch goed naar de Friesen te zien is Nicolai tot de conclusie kwam dat er wel echte Friese keningen was. Benamen de verneemde fibula van Wijnaldum toont dat nevens in oor.
De fibula van Wijnaldum is in mijn ogen echt een koninklijke fibula. En we kennen uit Friesland nu ook een groter aantal fondsen die we als geschenken van de koning aan leden van zijn gevolg kunnen interpreteren.
Maar dat gevolg wie dus volle liedse als ontnood had tocht. En daarmee de koninkrijk en ik. Net elke nien zal wies wezen, maar dit nieuwe verhaal van Friesland.
Ja, dat is zoals het is. Ik heb geprobeerd om echt de bronnen zelf te bestuderen. En daaruit blijkt nog steeds dat we ook in Friesland met koningschap te maken hebben. Maar dat hele grote koninkrijk, dat kan ik niet bewijzen op grond van de gegevens die ik nu heb verzameld.
So how did you shoot it?
Well, maybe I should first tell you guys what it was about. It was about a research on Frisian gold. You have a Friesland here as well. The general idea is that there was a huge Frisian kingdom in the past, but this researcher discovered there wasn't. And what you just saw was shot not on an iPhone, but on a Nokia, just to prove you can also do stuff on not on an iPhone.
How do you like that?
And
no comment.
And maybe it's also interesting to know that I did not use an external microphone on this one. This was all shot just on the phone. I had a phone and a tripod. The microphone you saw was for radio purposes, and that was on this phone. Radio, still iPhone, no Nokia, but yeah, I shot this with just a phone and a tripod.
And there was a beautiful shot where you kind of panned along the little thing that was lying in there.
Yeah.
You would normally need a dolly for that or something, so how did you do it?
I put the phone to the glass and just carefully slid it by. But everyone asks what kind of slider I used. Or glass.
So does this actually make sense? I mean, why do you all shoot on iPhone? Is it just because you can? Or does it make you a better journalist, a different journalist? Can you still tell stories differently?
I think that it frees you up completely. In terms of the amount of kit that you carry. TV last week in Tunisia, one of the camera crews that was putting live television pictures out brought 13 pelly cases through the airport. I had hand luggage. Everything was in hand luggage and that was it. It meant that he was waiting at the airport, I was already halfway down to Tunis. Halfway out of Tunis on the way down to Sousse. Where he managed to get there and get rigged the next morning, by which time I'd already done probably 4 or 5 lives and filed pictures and done all the other things that are in my job. I'm so much faster just working on your own and just working with a very, very small kit. And as long as you have the right bits of kit with you, you can do it. Even if all you have is your phone, you can still do so much.
Yeah, and you can also get far closer to your subject. People are reluctant to talk on a big camera. Easy to persuade them to tell their story, and it's more personal. The connection you get with your interviewee is far more personal with a phone than with your big camera, which you adjust and wait. You can be fast and close, so that's a bonus.
People always think that it's not professional. Critics will say it doesn't look professional enough if all you're using is a phone. And yet, we all have phones. We all know the technology. So when someone puts a phone between myself and you, then you're not scared. So you open up much more. You're absolutely right. It's the personal touch.
From a very simple kind of business point of view, as opposed to speaking as a journalist, the logic that sold it initially in RT was very simple. So we have about 140 journalists in our newsroom. We have 15 camera crews, we have 6 satellite trucks, and we have 8 craft editors. That's our technology team in news. What mobile brought to us was the potential to have effectively 155 cameras in the field. And you need to think about that for a minute, because actually we've trained 280 staff. So we've actually started to expand the training beyond just the journalists into production assistants, runners, anyone who's willing to come in and do the course, we'll happily give them the training. Because from our background logic, breaking news doesn't always come in the form of a press release. But there's a bloody good chance that we're going to have someone out there nearby who may not have a sat truck, and for the reasons you outlined, that sat truck might be 2 hours away before we get live pictures. What is happening out there is that the public are uploading this content to Facebook and YouTube. 300 hours per minute goes onto YouTube. By the time we get there, we set up a sat truck, we bring an ENG crew in, which because of union regulations is a separate crew deployed to the location. So by the time we get live pictures from the location, it's probably been periscoped an hour previous. There's exclusive pictures on YouTube, and as you saw last week, YouTube and Storyful are now pushing out their newswire of breaking news ahead of most newsrooms. So for us, there's a simple logic which says, one, it empowers every journalist potentially as a visual storyteller, but two, it also gives us a little bit of chance to reclaim some of that ground that's being lost to online.
And what do you say to people who say this is a way of mostly cost cutting with the result of getting pictures that are not as nice?
So there's a really interesting discussion came up recently. A guy from the EBU called me and asked to do an interview on this, and he's writing a thesis paper, and he got straight in on, but this is not up to broadcast standard. Why are you advocating technology that is not suitable to European broadcasting standards? And I said, you know, it's really odd that we had this conversation, because about 15 years ago, when we brought in video journalist cameras into RTE, we heard exactly the same argument. The sampling rate is 420, it's not good enough for broadcast. And I just asked him the same question that I always ask. The piece that we just showed you there a minute ago, would you sit at home watching that on your TV and go, Jeez, that was shot on the phone, wasn't it? Is that fierce? Isn't it awful that RTE are devaluing the type of stories that they're giving us now and giving us this sort of shit? No, more than likely you won't. More than likely you won't even know that that was shot on a phone, because we don't put a little strap up that says shot on mobile. We just put it out as a story. How it was produced is really none of your business. The journalism part, the story part, is the bit that's really important between us. So, you know, I've kind of, even though I started my career as a broadcast engineer, I've had some extremely heated discussions with some of my colleagues about this. TV has a lifespan ahead of it of about 20 years max. Linear broadcast television is about 20 years ahead of it, okay? If you look at what's happening with YouTube, if you look at what's happening with Facebook, if you look at all those metrics, you must somewhere realize that we will become irrelevant extremely quickly if we don't start to claw back some of that space where social news is breaking ahead of us. And mobile gives us the potential to do that. The audience are doing it anyway. So frankly, I could be extremely expletive in the answer, but I'll just say, at the end of the day, the positive reaction that we've gotten from the audience for the stories that we've done, and we've done over 65 stories this way now, has been they really don't care what technology we use. And when they watch it on their HD TV, after getting compressed to be J's that's gone up on satellite to be brought back down, they don't see the difference. As long as you use it with the same discipline and skills that you use as a visual storyteller with a bigger camera, frankly, no one should know the difference.
And as an added bonus, you can, during the day, during your shoot, you can send out teasers to get people to watch your TV show later. Because we all know, well, it's difficult to get people to watch TV nowadays, especially youngsters. And if you, well, tease them a little on Twitter, on Facebook, on, well, whatever, during your shoot, they might want to see the rest of the show as well.
What about the editing?
Sorry, there was one behind. Well, we did it afterwards.
Yeah, my question is, since you have a lot of experiences with that, for what kind of stories you would think is best suitable, this kind of reporting, and less suitable? I mean, but I would immediately would come up with, I mean, you have some limitations with using a mobile phone, for example, aesthetically, or cutting on a 5.5-inch monitor is probably not as pleasant as on a big screen and all that. So where would you say, where's the best way to use it? Not as good to implement it.
Personally, I think it works best when there is no TV crew there. When you are at a story that no one else is at. Now that could be an individual story, like Philip's piece that we saw before from RTE. There was just him there. In a huge news conference, is someone going to take your pictures from an iPhone in the same quality as an HD camera that's shooting and squirting down a satellite truck? Probably not. But 5 financially, it's, you know, there is a massive saving. There was a TV truck there in Tunisia last week. It was costing £5,000 a day, and that was in one location. They couldn't move it. I was able to move with my kit down onto the beach. It's those situations where you can't move quickly with a TV truck and a TV crew of 3 or 4 people plus the satellite, and they're the ones that I think are the most important.
But for you, it's less breaking news, really, but you use it every day, don't you? You could bring a camera.
I could bring a camera. I could bring a cameraman. I could bring everything I wanted, but I choose to do it on mobile. First of all, because I'm experimenting, I'm trying to find its limitations, its boundaries. But second of all, because well, what I said earlier, the individual approach, you can really get close to people and close to your story. It makes me a better storyteller. It's very personal, but it's more my story. When I film it this way, I think I produce a better story than when I have a camera with me, or when I shoot it with a VJ camera.
And did you find limitations yet, where you say next time I wouldn't take the phone?
I wouldn't try and do a sporting event. Because, well, basically, that doesn't work.
Well, what is your experience with RTE limitations?
So the one sole limitation that is effectively inhibiting this becoming a de facto solution is the absence of optical zoom. The absence of optical zoom. But the one thing I would say about mobile is, so I think the iPhone turned 8 about 3 or 4 days ago, okay, and the first generation had the shittiest camera imaginable on it. We've come through an evolution period over those 8 years where full HD has been there for the last 4 years. 4K is the next threshold. Samsung is already in the 4K space. Microsoft have dropped a 4K capable camera. Apple will become irrelevant extremely quickly if they don't decide to step up to that bar. So wait and see in September if they decide to drop a 12 megapixel 4K camera in the next iteration. With 4K comes the ability to create a HD image, a 1080 by 1920 image, and allows you to zoom in on the image effectively 4 times without any picture degradation. Okay? So yes, it's still not an optical zoom, but to the end user it gives you lossless quality zoom. And the next thing I would say to you is, in the last 2 weeks, something really interesting has come out. A camera called the DxO has been launched. It's not, I don't think it's available to buy yet, but it's the first camera product which actually connects to the phone through the Lightning connector. And for me, this is a new landmark, because what this brings with it now is the possibility that someone might actually look at the optics from something like a DSLR, which actually will allow you to interchange a lens or even put a decent zoom lens on it, and have that as an option plug-in feature for your phone. Why would you want to do that then? Because everyone says, but if you're going to use a DSLR, then sure, I mean, what's a big stretch to get a laptop? And then if you're going to spend all that money, why don't you buy the big professional camera? What you need to remember is the phone is not just a camera. The phone is like having a digital smart tool, like a penknife in your pocket. You can use it to create your social content, you can surf the web, you can watch TV, you can listen to radio, you can tweet, you can blog, you can live stream, you can edit. You can do all that stuff with one device. So having an optical plug-in that gives you the ability to zoom optically will be the next threshold. And the fact that there's one product on the market already that can plug in that way suggests to me that we may see on the horizon in the next year or possibly 2 years a device that really will fix that one thing. So I would reiterate what Vista said. Sport is the one weakness, because you're going to be at the end of a pitch trying to follow some action on the ball, and everyone's going to be a tiny blurry dot running around. There's no way to tell who it is. So unless your commentary is really excellent and engaging, it's not really going to work.
I did try to film a soccer match.
I've got 3 questions now. 1, 2, 3, and there's number 4. Number 5. So they're wonderful, lots of questions, so we try to keep it short.
Okay.
Number 1.
In the editing process, because we saw you did some mobile editing as well, is it really working to edit a piece on your iPhone? You don't use any keyboard shortcuts or anything, you're awfully slow.
No, I mean, it's slower than if you're using a laptop, but it's more portable, and so it's a trade-off. Everything is a trade-off. There's a compromise in everything you do, and it's working out which compromises to do on each individual story. So if I haven't got a laptop, I've taken that out of my equation. So if I've got to work on the iPhone, well, it then compromises which edits you do. Maybe maybe you don't do the craft edits at that point, and you'll send it in raw, and they'll work on it at that end. Maybe it's not that time relevant if you're trying to cut a story. Maybe you don't have to get out, so you don't have to be cut. But the edit with the music edit on those kids doing Zumba was all done on the phone, and it was able to sync perfectly. It's just simply just moving it with your finger into the right position.
We did an experiment here at NDR where 8 journalists had 3 hours of training, which you said is not enough, and it is not enough, so you need more training. And they went out the next day and shot pieces on location, and they had 2 hours between arriving, shooting, editing, overvoicing and uploading. And they did news pieces that were okay. So it is a compromise, and you can't do as much as you like, but the apps are really good as well, so you can do a lot, really. Number 2.
Yeah, I would imagine that there are situations where it can be crucial or useful to have a camera as a sign you are a professional journalist. So I'm thinking of crisis or war reporting. How do you see the use implementation of iPhones in these situations?
I've been... Go on.
No, go on.
No, you go.
I've done 10 training courses for Al Jazeera, okay? And Al Jazeera have no shortage of money, and they have lots of very, very big cameras, and yet they choose to train their staff to shoot with mobile devices and to shoot with DSLRs for that very reason. So you may know what happened to Al Jazeera staff in Egypt, for instance, where they're incarcerated for over 2 years. They are now deliberately teaching every one of their overseas staff to shoot with these devices because they don't have to wear a press badge across the back of their shoulders when they go to a scene. They can blend in like a member of the public, and with the same skills and discipline, they can generate content, like you've seen, that the audience doesn't have any idea. So, paradoxically, going in with the hard hat and the press badge and everything else perhaps is one way of opening doors, but there are times nowadays in particular where that means that you're going to be singled out, you're going to be ring-fenced and put into the must-see but not see anything else, whereas the other one allows you to go anywhere.
Did you have a moment, Nick, where you thought, I'd like to have a camera crew with me now for security, for the feel?
No, not really. I just echoing Glenn, it's much safer. It's much, much safer. I've never been in a situation where holding my iPhone, I've felt under threat, but I have been in a situation, even with a DSLR, that you start to feel targeted. It's just a much, much safer way of working, especially in the riots. You saw in the riots, literally there, as there were those shots of the Radio Manchester radio car being burnt out, I was standing next to it while it was happening and was able to record the voices of people doing the actions there and then. And that was happening live, and I was just standing there looking as if I was on the phone.
Over there was a question.
So, NDR and WR want to reduce costs. That's okay. That starts a debate on iPhones. But being here on a meeting on research journalism, my question is just how can you transmit by iPhone and shoot by iPhone and research in 1 minute, in a few minutes? Isn't it that we are looking for more interesting, more cooler tools? What does it bring for our profession of journalism? Or it brings us to a situation that looking at the news, I don't need news anymore. I have it everywhere on the net. So, but what brings journalism back to an importance? That are background stories. And if we do all the jobs other people do, what isn't iPhone journalism not a step to the end of journalism in a way?
Is it? No, I don't agree, because the stories you can tell with an iPhone are, well, because of the personal approach, you can tell it's your story, and people would want to see it because it's personal. Personal news is, well, the way to go nowadays, and I think if you try to find your own way of telling the news story, you can do that with an iPhone, maybe even better than with a full camera crew with all the preparation that takes.
Is the story what you see only? Is that the story?
Sorry?
Is the story only what you see?
Of course not.
Yeah.
But how does that differ if you're using a traditional camera crew?
Then you have a little more time.
You have more time.
For research, yeah.
How much? How so?
Well,
if you're
because they film and you have your head free for doing research.
I understand that at first there was a very steep learning curve to doing it, and at the beginning of the journey as a reporter taking this on, that the learning curve means that you can't concentrate on everything because you're just concentrating on the technicals. Once you are trained up, and it doesn't take long. Once you're trained up, the technicals look after themselves. You're not worrying about how to use the phone, because we all use them all the time. I use a proper camera, a proper broadcast camera once a month probably, and so I need to remember how to be using that. And so that's where I start compromising. So actually the technicals, you saw that I was able to rig a live TV in 8 minutes. I couldn't have done that the first time I did it, but I can do it now. And that meant that, you know, there wasn't the compromise there. I could just do it so quickly.
Yeah, plus you spend far more time in the field. So actually being in the spot where all the news is actually happening. Because you don't have to go back to the newsroom. You don't have to sit behind your laptop to do research, because you're there. You're on the spot where it's happening.
That is such a good point. You literally are. I mean, I spend my day on the story rather than driving into the office and having a cup of coffee and meeting friends and having a chat. I'm just on the story and that's it.
I'll just make one comment on it. When we brought video journalism in 15 years ago, we had exactly the same argument. When our journalists start to go out with big VJ cameras to shoot stories, does that not detract away from the journalism and the attention and the level of detail? The truth about it is that I used to manage ENG camera crews in our newsroom. I used to manage the craft editors that did the stories at the end of the day. And every single day we would have at least one journalist who had a complete and utter meltdown and would end up screaming in one of the editing rooms because their vision of the story was not what was being generated at the end of the day. Either the cameraman didn't get the shots that they wanted, or the editor decided to put their own spin on the story. So actually at the end of that day, what the journalist produced was a visual story that was broadcast, but not what they actually specifically wanted to create. What video journalism brought to the equation was, and it's not for everyone, I would absolutely say that, it's not for everyone. You do need a level of aptitude, but what it brought is the ability for a journalist to take full ownership of the story, from the very first step to the very last step, and then, more importantly as it is now, to follow it up with interaction with the audience afterwards, because we're accountable to the audience in real time now. And all that equation is what feeds future news. The old news model, unfortunately, I still think, is fundamentally not sustainable. It needs to move, it needs to reiterate, because the landscape that we're actually working in is changing around us extremely quickly. Social media is a huge driver that is actually putting pressure on us to actually maintain our credibility, maintain the quality of our storytelling, but we have to be responsive to the audience. It's a collaborative dialogue now. It's not a one-way, we feed you our stories anymore. And the only way that we're going to survive is if we engage wholeheartedly in that equation.
There you go. There are probably quite some Mojos amongst us. One is in the back there, Demian, who's been reporting from Ukraine, and he was arriving on the Maidan and couldn't reach his camera crew and just got out his mobile phone and started working. That was probably your first Mojo experience, and since then he's been experimenting. But you got a question?
Yeah, I've got a question because, well, we were talking about the lack of close-up pictures when working with iPhone cameras, especially when you can't get closer to the scene. So I'm currently experimenting with the wireless LAN function, Wi-Fi function of my DSLR camera to transfer pictures onto the iPhone. So I wanted to ask you if you have some experience, because actually the transferring time is not very good. So maybe you have some
Parallel modding, so
Yeah.
you've got a point there.
You're absolutely right. The DSLR manufacturers are awful because my Canon, for instance, can't wirelessly transfer video, which it's useless for that respect. And so you have to use an adapter and take the SD card and put it into an iPad, and then it will just pull it straight through. So that's the quickest way of working that I can use. You can also get Wi-Fi cards as well, but as you say, they are hopelessly slow at transferring video, and it is a problem. But it does, the shots of the kids dancing, they were shot on DSLR, and you really can tell. The rest of the stuff was probably shot on an iPhone 5, most of it, and you can tell the difference in the optics on that.
I'll probably offer that, if I can, that you stick around for some minutes after this, and if there are like specific technical questions, I think you're probably really happy to answer them about what works or what doesn't. But you've got experience with
Yeah, well, I tried this. This is an external lens. Also uses Wi-Fi. And you stick it on the back of your phone, and you can use your phone to, well, you have an impressive zoom ability and all that. But the transferring is what kills it, because it takes a lot of time, and time is, well, essential.
Question over there.
Yeah, thank you for this wonderful insight. And I'm a fan of not so many hardware with me on reporting outside. But what you're doing is a technical question all the time. What you're doing with the storage problem, you said you had a shoot with an iPhone 5, and if you want to make especially a longer piece and you want to cut it and you want to send it, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, quick answer.
Very quick answer, you delete an awful lot of stuff. You strip your phone back to bare bones. You don't have children's games on it, you don't have videos of, whatever, films on it. It's just a work phone and that's it.
And there's probably like a trend towards like a reporter phone, so if you go out, you don't only have one. Right? If you really want to shoot and everything, you have a second one with you, and one you use for shooting. And here comes the commercial clip.
Yes, yeah. I'm sponsored by SanDisk, by the way. No. You now can get products like this. There's about 8 of them on the market that will allow you to basically plug this device into your phone and double your storage. So this is only a 16 gig, but there's a 128 gig version of this available, which means that you can back up content to it, not necessarily just delete. So that's a big advantage. Obviously, Apple don't want you to use these. They want you to use iCloud, and Google wants you to use Google Cloud and all the rest of it. But you have options for storage. The way that we've approached Mojo is very, very simple. We have 4 workflows. There is the shoot on the device, edit on the device, send from the device workflow. There's the shoot on the device, bring it to an iPad, which, by the way, is your best solution if you want to bring stuff in from a DSLR as well, because you can just get the camera connection kit, which has got fast transfer speeds. So you edit on the actual iPad and transfer via FTP from the iPad. You can obviously bring it into a laptop using Final Cut, Premiere, or anything else, or you bring it into your main newsroom system. The downside of the main newsroom system generally is it needs to be transcoded from progressive, high definition, down to whatever format your newsroom uses, and that, ironically, slows the process down.
There was another question over there.
I'm a journalist teacher, and I do a lot of Mojo courses at my school, but we always recognize certain problems in recording sound professionally. So I can record pictures and movies very professionally, but I can't do it as professional recording sound. How do you solve this problem?
So we have 2 different solutions. One is this kit, which is what we adopted 4 years ago for our journalists, and now we've just adopted the new Sennheiser mics that have just been released. So this is an iRig Pro with a professional grade lav mic. This goes in on the lightning port in the phone. I can get preamp power, I can set an audio level. The new Sennheiser mic is very, very simple. You just simply plug it straight into the phone on the lightning connector. It's got about 1.5 meters cable, so it's long enough to give your framing for your interview, and you can set the audio level in the app. It's very, very straightforward, and all the 60 stories that we've done have been shot with this solution.
Which app do you use?
Filmic Pro.
How much is it?
This particular mic, about €217. And this solution here, about 120 for that part. The benefit of this is you can use any mic, so you could use a stick mic or anything else as well. And then that lav is about 130, so they're similar in cost.
I'd like to ask one question for the last 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
If we're doing journalism with devices that everyone owns, and if we're doing journalism with apps that everyone can use, are we not digging our own grave because in the end everyone can do Mojo?
No, because I think we're making a transition from being a journalist into being a storyteller. The way you tell your story is what makes you different from anyone holding up a phone and just shooting some raw material. The way you tell your story is what makes you special, and is what is, I think, the future of journalism. We're no longer journalists, but storytellers.
Yep. Absolutely 100% behind that. I think that's the key thing. I think the technology is just a means to an end. The thing that separates a professional journalist from all the hundreds of hours of user-generated content is the story. The way that you bring the professional training that you brought, so transparency, balance, understanding the legal principles and how you report, all that stuff is that what reinforces your role as a professional storyteller. And just to give it a simple point, there was a great statistic done a while back about Twitter breaking news before big organizations did. If you looked at the trends, yes, sure, people saw on Twitter big breaking news. What's the first thing they did after they saw that tweet? They went to one of the reputable news organizations to get it verified and get the facts. That's what journalism is. That's the journalism future.
If you think of the Seuss attacks last week, there were hundreds of hours of video of the attacks taking place uploaded to YouTube. And that was material that the journalists missed completely because we weren't there when they happened. However, where are all the interviews with the families? Where are all the interviews with those that are injured? Where are the interviews with the people who own the hotels, the people who've lost their jobs, all the rest of it? That's where the journalism is. And that's still going on, and that still will go on. And yes, there will be a place for those moments in history that are caught on YouTube, and that will be its place, but it will not have the material that tells the real story.
Is there also a chance in Mojo in that everyone can use it? Like thinking of developing countries who can't afford expensive television technology. Have you any experience with that? Have you been training there?
So I've been asked to do a couple of projects like that. For instance, BBC is a big overseas project training people, and we had a guy that spoke at MojoCon who had done it with Aboriginal tribes in Australia to empower them to tell stories in their communities because the main media effectively ignored them. And it's one of the exciting possibilities that this brings to the equation because it's such a low entry point. I've been trying to get RTE to buy into this idea that we would do a community outreach initiative and find the people in communities around the country and give them the skills for free to show them how they can create content that we might be able to host for them later on.
There's one thing that I forgot to put on my... I forgot so much to put on that form. A project I did in January. One of the real problems with covering Ebola is that to get pictures from an Ebola camp, you need a camera person in there. If you have a camera person in there, well, they have to be completely rigged up, and there are so many risks that it's not worth their while going in. So what we did was we gave doctors, a team of doctors from all the NGOs that were treating Ebola patients, we gave them an iPod Touch. I'd set it up so that as soon as they went into their own camp where they had Wi-Fi, it started to automatically upload all the video footage from the camera roll up to our servers, because I was able to access the Dropbox accounts. So that moment meant that they could be right in the middle of the action and doing pieces for us. And that's a huge change. Suddenly what you're doing is you're empowering those very individuals, and yet we can still do the craft edit back at base. So instead of sending a camera crew in, getting the footage back a week later, we were getting it 45 minutes after they'd filmed it. And that was a brilliant thing. And all it was an iPod Touch, a €30 clip-on microphone, and the pair of headphones that came with the iPod, and that was it.
We basically did the same, but not with Ebola, but with the chickens disease. The farm went in complete lockdown. No one could get there. We gave the farmer a phone to tell his story, his inside story of how he saw what happens around him, around his farm, all his chickens getting killed, and it was a very powerful thing. We just gave him an iPhone and told him, well, give us a couple of shots every day and tell your story on camera, and you have, well, a story you could not have done without a phone.
This is the last chance for questions, I guess. There are about 5 minutes left, so if there are any, go ahead.
Something technical, because I'm a big fan of Samsung mobile phones. Is there any nice editing app for Samsung?
Well, you wouldn't know.
No, I know, all right. I'm in discussions with Samsung. Yes, KineMaster seems to be the de facto solution for Android. Would you reiterate that one, Vincent?
I never used Android.
So we Windows. Yeah, okay. So I'll do a little Android speak.
KineMaster is good, and there's a good camera. The Cinema F.
Yeah, Cinema FV5 is a really good camera app for Android as well. The only tiny caveat I would say, and this is why, even though Android is 73% of the market share, the reason that iPhone, arguably, is the go-to device for journalists is because fragmentation in the Android space means that apps won't work on all the Android devices. So if you have a high-end Android device, like a Sony, LG, Samsung, one of those, there's usually a free version of those high-end apps that you can test on your device, and then if it works, then you can buy the full version to use. But a couple of people that we would regularly liaise with on Twitter would say that KineMaster is the de facto solution for Android.
Okay, thank you.
So then I'll do a little round of last questions.
Okay.
Glenn, what do you think? Will it, in 5 years from now, you can't know, but what do you speculate? Will it still be a little niche mainstream to bring your iPhone and use it to report? Or maybe your Android phone?
5 years, given the current evolution cycle, is quite a long time. My crystal ball, which is a bit cloudy, would suggest that actually, I think we're going to see this model grow. I think the thing that was a real eye-opener at MojoCon actually was the amount of organizations who came as delegates, and yet when you got talked to them, said, yeah, we've been doing it, but we didn't tell anyone because, it's still very, very contentious. I think in 5 years, we're probably going to see someone like Google with YouTube come out with a newswire system where they're basically encouraging people to contribute real stories. Think about it, the amount of freelance journalists out there who right now are press photographers and doing journalism on the side, or even students who get out of college and can't get a job in one of our stations, they're still itching to tell stories, and they're using YouTube as a platform, but not in a cohesive sort of holistic way. Google are implicitly aware of this. Facebook are implicitly aware of this. And I think in the last couple of weeks alone, I think the deals that we've seen struck with publishers and everything show that these guys know news is a big deal. There's a market, it attracts an audience, they're going to keep putting resources in there. So eventually, we could see a point where freelance journalists are effectively paid for the work on Facebook or YouTube, and then every TV station in the world is going to go, shit, we missed a trick, we need to try and reclaim that ground. And that's going to happen in 5 years for sure.
I mean, Nick, you're with the BBC. You know, the BBC, our postal address is even Hugh Green Way, which is your Director General. So, do you see the BBC embracing Mojo, or will they still be able to afford satellite trucks and everything and do that in 5 years from now?
I think satellite trucks will change completely in 5 years' time. I think that the amount of people that we continue to train within the organisation will continue to rise. We're at the moment seeing around 400 pieces per day filed through to radio stations on the BBC from mobile phones through our own app that we designed and is just for the BBC at the moment. So that's 400 pieces of audio going in every day. 90 or 95% of the traffic is audio at the moment. The video side will increase, and the stills images side will increase as well, as there's more integration between websites and as Vita said, promoting your own material when you're out on the road. I think that's such an important thing. It's something that we've never been able to do. Up to now, when you listen to the radio and a piece comes on, that was the moment that you went, oh, something about the radio about such and such. You had no forewarning that something was going to happen. And now, because of the way that we can use the devices, you can trail ahead, you can tease, you can suggest people listen, you can mark something much, much more. The amount of people that are against it in the BBC has gone down so much, and the people who are now seeing the opportunities is really on the rise.
And what about your company? Do you see yourself as a lonely Indian in 5 years from now?
No. Especially now in radio, as Nick said, in radio, iPhone will be the way to go for every journalist. Because there's no downside, really. The only people you have to convince of the future of mobile journalism is your tech people. Because basically they will gonna, for as long as they can, gonna say, no, it's not good enough. Even if you can prove it is. So if you can convince them, then it's the future. For radio, yes, and for TV, I think in 5 years will be, at least it will be in everyone's kit bag when they go, maybe next to a general camera, but everyone has it.
So one special skill that we didn't talk about, that you wouldn't think about maybe, that a mobile journalist needs.
I would just simply say to not be fearful of failing. For me, that is the pivotal thing. When you do a course and you sit down with a group of professional journalists, they're under peer pressure. Everyone feels out of their comfort zone. They're kind of learning something that's not familiar to them, and they are all scared shitless of making a show of themselves in front of their colleagues. So bizarrely enough, the people who take to this the fastest are usually the new journalists that have come 2 or 3 years out of college. They've cut their teeth on the stories. They have no fear. In fact, if anything, they're worried that their jobs might be lost in the morning, so they're willing to go that extra mile to prove themselves. They push the boundaries all the time. The guys who've been doing journalism for 25 years, who are used to having 4 people supporting them doing their job, they're petrified that they'll be asked to do this because many of them fear technology. And it's a real paradox, because what you need to try and do is you need to try and capitalize on that experience and at the same time not lose them, because the fear is that they'll just quit if you really put them under pressure. So we never made Mojo mandatory in RTE. We made it optional. If you want the skills, we'll come and we'll train you, we'll give you the gear, you do what you want with it, and we'll mentor you, which is really important. The feedback loop is really important. I think if you try to force it through in a traditional organization, it would be a disaster. I think you have to let it drip feed and grow almost like a mushroom field. Just leave it off and let it do its thing.
Nick, any special
Exactly
skill
what he said.
Nothing
Exactly
else?
what he said. No, special skills. Don't forget things. Don't forget things when you go out.
And as you do?
Know where to get one. So for instance, where to get a battery, where to get one. Here's one of my favourite little pieces of kit. Right, this is brilliant. This is from the Sheraton Hotel. So it's a nice, hard to get into.
It's a condom, isn't it?
It's not a condom.
All right, okay, sorry.
Well, if it is, I'm in real trouble. It's a shower cap. You put the shower cap over the phone, and the phone's suddenly waterproof. Harriet from Sky told me about that. And it's a brilliant, brilliant trick, because just keeping your phone dry.
Well, that's precisely what I was going to say. You have to be a problem solver, because you're going to run into technical problems, all sorts of problems, and you have to solve it yourself because you're all by yourself. And you have to be creative in that, not just in telling your story, but also how you solve the problems. Just like Nick just showed, that's the way, well, to do Mojo. Just, it doesn't work like that. Well, I'll just go around and do it like that.
We are problem solvers. Hot day, you need to stay hydrated. So thank you very much that you came all the way.
Thank you so much.
This is Hamburg craft beer. So you know that we do good beer over here as well.
Oh yeah.
And thank you very much for your questions, and thanks for being here.